All right, 6:04, and we are calling the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage meeting to order. Before we move to adopt the meeting agenda, I just need to add an agenda item, which is roll call. So if I can just have a motion that we add a roll call to the agenda item.
So moved.
Is there a second?
So second.
All right, motion carries. So roll call, I will do that since the staff is new and probably doesn't have everybody's name. So I am here, Chair Hughes, Vice Chair Doe,
Present.
Secretary Mullins,
Present.
Treasurer Daniels, so she is not on yet. So Councilmember Nandi, not on yet. I know Councilmember Winston and Lee are actually excused. Councilmember Busa
Present.
and Councilmember Crawford, and I know Carl is there, but I know he's having some issues. So we do see that you're present. And Councilmember Dukes.
Present.
And am I missing? I feel like I'm missing someone. Yes, it's Councilmember Bonds. Is he on? I do not see him. Okay.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Daniels, I believe, was excused. She sent a note a week ago that she couldn't
Yes,
get the
she did.
exact
I'm
name
sorry.
today.
She sure did. That was my fault. Yeah, so we have 3 for excuse, and this is more for Mary's sake with the minutes. So Councilmember Winston, Councilmember Lee, and Councilmember Daniels have all been excused from today's meeting. So if we can move to the next agenda item to adopt the meeting agenda. If I can have a motion to adopt the meeting agenda.
So moved. Carl Crawford.
Is there a second?
Second. Andre Dukes.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. For the consent agenda item, we actually will not approve anything. What we do need to have approved, though, is because there was a transition that happened with Shakira. So as you all know, if you haven't heard, she did have a beautiful baby girl. So she is out on maternity leave. And so right around the time we had our meeting, 2 days later, she gave birth. So we do not have meeting minutes that were ready while we're in the transition. And so what we want to get a motion on is for us to be able to approve November and October meeting minutes at our next board meeting in December. So if that's okay, because we did not have anything available due to the transition, I would just want to make sure that that's okay, that we will move the meeting minutes, approve the meeting minutes from October and for this meeting next month. I just need a motion for that.
Chair to table. So moved to table the minutes upon approval of the meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Thank you. Treasurer Daniels is not available, so I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Sloan. So Linda, if you want to share the MFR report and put that on the screen.
Okay, great. So you have before you is the manager's financial report. Not much has changed. We still have the excess of $67,000. What you'll note, though, down at the bottom is that we did receive a $10,000 check from the Minnesota History Center, and that's for the oral history project. One of the things I wanted to mention too is under the unobligated, we have that minus 15,000. And that again was just because of the annual report expense was not in this budget. And so I'm working with the accounting department to get that moved out. So the next time you see this report, you won't see that negative number there. So that's it. Any questions on the report?
The one thing I would just point out, and this, I just, want to make sure that we're bringing this up each and every meeting, is our unobligated. That is the line item that we want to pay attention to. So right now it shows that we have 67,460. So we know that that number is going to be shifted. But the other thing that I would say is we know we could potentially have to have budget cuts. We may have to dip a little bit into that because it does have to be costed. This is the end of the biennium year. So as you all know, that our budget is the fiscal year to fiscal year, but biennium, so it's a, and this is the end of that year that we can carry like we were able to last fiscal year. So those dollars will be exhausted by June 30th of 2021, which is the end of this fiscal year.
And Madam Chair, one thing also is that we will have a salary for our temporary worker that will have to be probably taken out of that $67,000.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Any question in reference to what the report that was given? It's a pretty standard budget. There's not a lot of movement that we do with this one because dollars, as you can tell, do actually come up.
No question for me.
All right, hearing none, we're going to move over to our special guest. We are so excited to have Commissioner Ho here joining us from the Minnesota Finance Housing Division. So, Commissioner Ho, we're going to turn it over to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't know how formal you are, so Madam Chair and members. All right, okay, dial it back a little.
We're not that formal.
Okay. I'm not that formal either, but I wanted to just acknowledge that even though I had spent some time with the previous director, I've never met with the council. And so I really appreciate the invitation to be with you here, even for a short time. And I didn't want to prepare a presentation because I didn't know like where I was starting on a scale of like 0 to 5. In terms of what was what you wanted to know and what was important to you. So if I can just turn this around for a moment and either invite folks in the chat or invite folks just to speak up about whether there's specific things you want to talk about or whether you want just kind of a really basic overview of what is Minnesota housing. I think that'll help me land my remarks in a way that's going to be the most relevant to you all. So
what I would say is what will probably be helpful just for a starting point is just because I know we do have one community member that's showing up that's actually joining us via WebEx, but then we also are streaming this live on Facebook. And so maybe just kind of give a high level overview of the department and how, the work that you all do really help and impact our community.
Happy to do that. So the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, Minnesota Housing, as we go by, is different than a lot of the other state agencies. Most of the other state agencies, not all of them, but most of the other state agencies are kind of completely responsible for how something operates in the state. Right? If you think about the Department of Human Services, they're completely responsible for how medical assistance operates in the state, how food assistance and economic assistance operate in the state. Department of Corrections is responsible for the whole state prison system and things that happen both, post-release. The health department right now, right? Something that we're paying a lot of attention to, responsible for public health and being prepared for things like pandemics. Minnesota Housing and the housing finance agencies in the rest of the country are slightly different. We were created first much later than many of them. We were created in 1974. And we're basically created to be the state's housing bank. So we have access to bonding authority. We have access to federal low-income housing tax credits. We back mortgages for first-time home buyers who get down payment assistance through Minnesota housing programs. We support a network of partners who do first-time home buyer education and counseling. We use the federal low-income housing tax credit to invest in the creation of more housing that's affordable. We do preservation of projects that have like a HUD, project-based Section 8, say senior housing or public housing in a community. We have programs that prevent and end homelessness that are financed through the legislature. So we are involved in kind of all things housing, from home ownership and home rehabilitation loans to the creation and preservation of multifamily apartment buildings, to the prevention of homelessness. But we are not responsible for a system of housing across the state that covers everything. In fact, I would argue there's not a system of housing across the state. And, are dealing with the reality that because there is not a well-financed housing system, it feels like we're constantly working against kind of the forces of inadequate housing and the disproportionate impact of both historic housing policy that was designed to be discriminatory, as well as an under-resourced system where only 1 out of every 4 households who needs housing assistance has access to that. So, that we have access to some of these unique financial tools, both through the legislature and through the Congress, and trying to figure out how to target those in a world where the homeownership gap in Minnesota is the 4th worst in the country for Black, Indigenous, and families of color, where homelessness impacts Black and Indigenous communities at hugely disproportionate rates, where the rental market doesn't work for folks who have lower wage jobs or live on a fixed income. So, what we try to do is express our policy priorities in ways that people who, we don't build housing, we don't preserve housing. I don't have a construction company, right? We finance both for-profit and nonprofit and public entities who want to either build more housing or preserve housing that's there, or expand homeownership education to folks. One thing that's very front and center right now is that our agency is administering the COVID housing assistance program, which is emergency housing assistance to deal with the economic crisis that COVID has created for so many people. I will just do a quick plug. If you know people who need emergency housing assistance, this is federal money that expires on December 30th. So we've had to operate with incredible speed, but you can access information about that through 211, either by calling 211 or going to 211unitedway.org. If you have a past due housing bill, going back as far as March, when COVID first got to us here. So, that is kind of a one-time huge infusion of cash to help deal with this crisis. We also have a network of folks who operate the Family Homeless Prevention and Assistance Program. So it's really kind of the whole range of ways in which housing is needed and manifests itself in our community, trying to deal with the lack of supply or the deterioration of housing that impacts low-income households and communities of color the most. And I think that's probably just the broadest overview I can offer, maybe just as a point of context, because we have access to resources through bonding and tax credits and just the money that we earn on loans and mortgages that we as an agency make. We're actually a very small part of the legislatively appropriated biennial budget. We represent less than 0.3% of the whole biennial state appropriation. I think, knowing that really the need for a lot more housing that's affordable, my slogan is "Go big so everyone can go home," and would love to, have resources, including from the legislature, to be able to plug away at creating housing that's specifically targeted to Minnesota households who make the least. But at the same time, not every state housing finance agency has any appropriations from their state legislature. So one of the things that I think makes us a housing finance agency that's really able to tackle things like the homeownership gap and preventing and ending homelessness and things like that is because of the important partnership that we've had with the legislature. So I think I'm just going to stop there, because I think rather than just filling all my time with words, I would rather hear the questions that you have, although based on Carl's question in the chat, one thing I will speak specifically to is the governor's executive order suspending evictions. We put that in place very early on when the pandemic hit, and the duration of that has followed the governor's peacetime state of emergency powers. So as the governor seeks to extend those with special session number 6 this Thursday, assuming that the House supports the governor continuing to have those powers, the evictions moratorium will continue then for another 30 days, and if he extends it for another 30 days. The problem that we have right now is that the failure of Congress to do a second stimulus package that directly helps renters is that the money that we have from the first stimulus, the coronavirus relief funds that are paying for our COVID housing assistance program, that money goes away at the end of December. So I'm very concerned about what happens. I'm concerned that we're not seeing a lot of let's get it together out in Washington, D.C. I'm worried that we will not be able to get past some conversations that got us unable to do anything in partnership with the legislature at the end of the last legislative session. I'm hoping we can hit the reset button and see if there's some things that we can do around eviction protections in partnership with the legislature when we go back in January. So now I'll really pause and see if people have questions or other things they want me to elaborate on.
And I'll just read out, she just responded. This is more for the Facebook audience because they don't know what's in the chat. So the question that Carl had asked was, how can we better prepare our community to be prepared after the pandemic? Typically, when there's an event of this magnitude in America, Black and brown people lose their homes. Wayne has just posted as well, and his question is, how do you envision homelessness after the pandemic and emergency assistance, and what measures will you employ to get homeless folks off the street?
I've been working in the homelessness space since 1999, and it's an area that I have a lot of personal passion, interest, and experience in. I think that what the pandemic exposed is something that we've always known but not really acknowledged, which is homelessness in and of itself is a public health crisis. Homelessness itself is a state of emergency. And we have seen in Minnesota the number of people living outside steadily increase over the last 5 or 6 years. But the way that it's been managed is just move along, move along, move along, move along. And when COVID came and we told people to stay at home, the coffee shops closed, Metro Transit shut down, public spaces shut down. People who have been living without a home and just always on the move were suddenly sitting down and very, very visible. And so communities have experienced this as an enormous growth in the number of people who are living outside. I think the way that I co-chair the Minnesota Interagency Council on Homelessness with Commissioner Harpstead at the Department of Human Services, an effort that's led by Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. I mean, I think what we see in the data is it's not that it's a bigger number, it's that a problem that just was kept in motion, on the light rail from one end to the other, just suddenly became more visible in the parks and in the communities. I've seen just extraordinary efforts because of the pandemic, because of the way that the uprisings following the murder of George Floyd were happening in close proximity to some of the encampments. I've seen just extraordinary efforts to help people have options to come inside for safety's sake. And, the state has funded both through state COVID appropriations, but also, one-time federal assistance, an extraordinary number of opportunities, for example, to use hotels as a place for people to be safe, people who are vulnerable from COVID to have a place of their own, for people who got COVID to be. But what we've also seen is the human services organizations that have expertise in sorting and working with people who have mental illness or substance use disorder. Those nonprofits just be horrifically strained in terms of their human capacity. And now what we're seeing with the spike in the virus is that, staff, are in danger of bringing virus into some of these shelter settings or hotel settings because of the activities that they're doing when they're not at work. It's been extraordinary to me in the conversations I was in March. I think that we were terrified. I know that we were terrified. I was terrified that we were going to see COVID spread like wildfire amongst people who are living outside just because of the circumstances of that. And I think the just incredible work of public health workers, healthcare for the homeless, nonprofit outreach workers, kind of miraculously, it held in check. Not that it didn't happen. Over 300 people experiencing homelessness have been tested COVID positive. They have a 4 times higher rate of hospitalization than people who aren't homeless. We're also seeing a growth in the number of staff and pressure on staff to go to work, even if they're sick because they're running out of leave. So, I think this is just one of these places where, there've been some really hard conversations between the state and the counties and the cities and the parks about who's responsible for what. But in reality, we knew before COVID that there wasn't a clear, accountable set of responsibilities to which each level of government was assigned, and it was inadequately resourced. And we had already been convening conversations that brought, in the metro area anyways, the counties, the cities, and state government together to try to envision what a more rational, unsheltered regional homelessness system would look like. I think, what COVID has showed us is that, if we had been able to do this work pre-COVID, we would have been in less of a scramble. But I am pleased to see people figuring out how to stand up additional shelter capacity. I have been amazed at nonprofits' capacity to, even though they're just wheezing, to be able to volunteer to take on one more assignment and one more project. And I think the quality of the conversations between Minneapolis and Hennepin County and the state and St. Paul, Ramsey County and the state are trending in the right direction. We have good days and bad days in this conversation, but they're trending in the right direction. And I think that, folks who didn't used to have to pay attention to homelessness that much because it was in motion have really had a crash course. And I think, we've really learned what some of this one-time infusion of money can do, but all of that money also has a cliff. So I think just recognizing that no unit of government has this by themselves, that we have to figure out how to work in partnership, and we have to kind of use the best purpose of each flavor of money that comes into the system. And we need to have places for people to go that reflect what they want, that aren't so programmatic that people just don't want to access the stuff that's out there. Sorry, I can get long on that answer, so I'll cut myself off.
No, that's good though. So I have kind of two questions. Well, one question and one kind of statement, if you will. One of the things that I continuously hear, and I hear this from, I would say, residents, people in general, that there's this money that's available that's being able to help folks that can't pay their rent or can't pay their housing note. But there's also this fear to say, what's going to happen once this money is gone? What would you recommend that folks start looking into as far as resources? Because that has come up multiple times. And we know that our Black and Brown folks, our African heritage folks are the ones that are really, and Indigenous as well, are really the ones that this is going to impact, from a greater perspective. So it's the pre-COVID, it's the COVID, and now it's the after COVID. What types of things have you all started to think about as far as being able to address that? And then I'll save my next thing after you answer that.
Sure. Well, first of all, if you're behind now, take advantage of the resources that are there now. They're going away. So, just because it can pay your past due bills and get you kind of at least back to current standing. I think, as I've interacted with the legislature over the years, they don't hear enough from constituents that housing is a top priority item. And so folks seem to find my email and my phone number a lot, and I'm happy to take all that incoming. But if you're not talking to your city council member, your county commissioner, and your state legislator and your congressional delegation, then I can't make resources appear out of nowhere. The Department of Human Services that predominantly funds shelter can't make those resources come without it being a part of a federal or a state package. And so really, as we head into January, when some of these federal resources end, we need loud and persistent and clear voices about the need for resources. The state budget deficit, does not help, because if you ask for more, they'll say more. But if we don't have more, and you can imagine, what is going to happen, what's going to happen if the governor loses his peacetime state of emergency powers, or at some point in time, he won't need them. And so we just have to really make sure that it's real. I've got a beautiful home. And when I had to go home on March 16th, I could figure out how to make it work. And so, as somebody who's making it work, the fact that it's harder for it to work for other people, who's picking up the phone and calling on behalf of folks who are just trying to survive right now. And I think that, that's what we need to have happen, because and this goes back, I first went to the legislature in the 2000 session, and I had so many legislators, both parties, say to me, no, my constituents never call me about housing. They call me more about wanting wine sold in grocery stores than they call me about housing. And I just have to believe that in our heart of hearts, we care more about people having that foundational stability of a home than we care about being able to buy a bottle of wine when we go pick up dinner.
Right.
But it's not how it comes across to legislators, and it's not the number one thing that they hear about. And And it's going to make a big difference, especially given the divided legislature and the fact that my Senate committee is also agriculture and rural development. And most of the senators who serve on that committee are on it because it's agriculture and rural development. Yep. And then we talk about housing, and they think that's a metro issue. It's not. It's a statewide issue. When I used to travel around the state, there wasn't any community where it wasn't a problem, and especially a problem either for folks who are aging or for folks who are kind of at entry level incomes, or people with disabilities, or who are homeless, who just have a harder time, holding on to a steady job. But it's still characterized as a Metro versus Greater Minnesota issue, even though the data will tell you it's not true.
So Carl just put in the chat, so second question that he has is around redlining in rural or smaller communities. So what efforts are being made to combat this issue in smaller communities?
Carl, thanks for that question. And I'll just say, I've never been asked that question before. And to me, most of the conversations about redlining I've been in have been about the metro area, where you just had more people of color and therefore more of this discriminatory behavior. But I will go back to my research folks who are probably smarter and better read than I am to find out what the history of redlining is in rural or smaller communities. I just don't know the answer to that, but it's a great question.
Thank you for that. And then my final question, because I know that time went quick, but my final question is more of a question back to you, to us. What is it that the council can do to help support the efforts that you're doing in your agency, and how can we be of assistance?
I think as you think about your 2021 strategy, thinking about where housing fits in the priority, I think COVID has just so exposed when our homes have become the place where we stay safe, or where we, protect ourselves, or we recover. COVID creates another context for which to talk about the importance of home. I think we all get it. Like, it's where we raise our families. It's, where you turn off the computer these days. It used to be where you went home to at the end of the day. Now you just turn off the computer at the end of the day, and it's just where we, sustain ourselves. It's where we get to feel the most free to be ourselves. And we just don't have enough of it. We were down, 50, 60,000 units of housing before COVID. And I think that's just going to be a need to elevate this, as if we don't get housing right, it's really hard to get anything else right, whether that's healthcare, education, criminal justice, because it's so integral.
Right. No, that is helpful. Amber, I do have a question for you, because I see that you posted a comment from Facebook, but what was that in reference to?
I'm not sure what comment it was, because I have to toggle, so I don't know at what timestamp it went in. But okay. I think it does speak to Commissioner Holt's point about making sure that that legislators are making this a priority in their work.
Okay.
And I'll just speak to it directly. I absolutely don't blame people who are struggling in this housing market or struggling with homelessness. This is the result of systemic, intentional work to benefit some folks over other folks, and the lack of will to build it back right at the scale that's needed, so that we all have that foundational security of a home, let alone home ownership opportunities that allow us to build equity and pass along intergenerational wealth. So I guess I would say, I don't know what it was in reaction to that I said, but I agree with the sentiment of the comment.
Right. No, thank you for that. And also the other downside I would say with Facebook is they're getting it's delayed. So we moved on to a topic and then they're just not responding. So we'll have to figure out, at what point was that timestamp, like Amber had said. Well, Commissioner Holt, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Appreciate you coming and being able to give some insight into not only your agency, but just, some of the resources, and specifically, for the public, again, we can't stress enough that the dollars are done as of December 30th of this year. So if you have a need, then definitely reach out, call 211 or the United Way. That can give that. Wayne, did you have one last question? I saw you had unmuted yourself and then you muted yourself back.
Yes, I do. And the context does, I want to ask a question, and it has to do with the fact that a few years ago, I volunteered with an organization to help feed the homeless in Minneapolis. And my question is more because I did hear you talk about nonprofit organization. Are there specific funding to help a nonprofit organization that help the homeless? How can they access that?
Yeah, so a lot of the funding for homeless services goes through the Department of Human Services as opposed to coming through Minnesota Housing. We work more on the homelessness prevention side and on the financing of housing resources. But I know that especially with COVID, there's been a lot of emergency assistance, both state and federal money that's gone towards food, that's gone towards hotels, that's gone towards expanded shelter space. And, the vast majority of direct homeless assistance in Minnesota is done through an incredible network of nonprofits. I think that it's, sadly, the funding for it is inadequate at the federal level. It's inadequate at the state level. Some local communities put more in, and these nonprofits have to do an extraordinary amount of private fundraising. And I would much rather see just kind of, let's decide what is a rational way to finance helping people avoid homelessness whenever they can and resolve it as quickly as possible when it happens. It's kind of, COVID's going to make us rethink shelter because of social distancing and just, public health things and stuff like that. Let's use this moment of kind of the triple crisis to rethink what's a better way to build it back. But certainly, Department of Human Services has resources that are tied to food assistance for people in shelter or for people who are living on the streets. Thanks again for having me come.
Thank you.
Like I said, it's a great invitation, and Director Sloan, looking forward to working with you in the future. Please let me know how I can be useful. I appreciate the opportunity just to talk about all these things and for the audience that you generate on Facebook. So to all the folks out there, housing just has to be job one. So thanks.
Yes, thanks. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is public comments. And I don't know if we had anyone that is actually either on the call. I know we have one person that's actually joining us, and I don't know if there's any public comments. Linda, had you all got anything? Linda or Mary or Amber? Had anybody sent you all any questions or anything?
Yeah, one person signed up, but I don't see that person on.
Okay. I'll wait a few minutes, and I don't see anyone. All right, so I will keep moving on to our next agenda item, which is unfinished business bylaws review. Wayne, you want to take that item?
Yes, sure. So basically, during our last full meeting, the chair did mention that the executive council had talked about looking at the bylaws entirety. We can do a review, and I was excited to actually lead that effort. And we put out, if we have any volunteer to with that process, we appreciate it. But up to the last thing, we didn't have any, and that's what I reported. So we asked again if there's any volunteer to the bylaws, because I think and I agree that we need to look at some revision and see what we can put forward now. I mean, it's not an emergency to do it right now, but at least we should have the time to do that. So if any other council member would like to actually help in that process, that's fine. Otherwise, we probably just defer to the executive committee to do that, and then we present that to the council. So that's an option.
Any questions, comments to Wayne? All right, thanks, Wayne. And so we will actually get back together. The executive committee will meet this month, and then we'll be able to discuss, what the next step will be around that. If we don't hear anybody else that comes forward. And keeping in mind that one of the things that we said is we have to be mindful that we can only have no more than 3, because if we have more than, if we get to like 4 or 5, then we're going to be considered a am I frozen?
No, you're
okay.
good.
I'm sorry, because my bandwidth just showed up something. But if we have more than that, then we're going to end up with a quorum. And so we're trying to avoid having a quorum. And then it would become a public meeting just to discuss bylaws. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to move on to and if there's no questions, I'm not hearing any. So we'll move on to the new business. And this is actually, I'm going to turn this over to Linda or Amber. I don't know which one of you all are doing this. I think Linda, you are. We had talked about, just so that you all kind of knew what the annual report timeline is. So if you probably want to share that.
Okay, so what you have before you is the timeline for getting our annual report done. They are planning to have this completed by January 19th. As you can see, it's a very aggressive timeline in terms of every 3 or 4 days, there is something that needs to be approved. So we will be coming back to you periodically to just let you know where we are and get some feedback. Today, we're actually due to have a couple of themes reviewed and approved to move forward. So if you look at where it says themes, that's due today. So I have a couple of things that I would like to run past you today. So 2 themes. The first theme is Empowerment 2020, and this theme is geared towards showing how the CMAH is empowering greater equality, policy, and action. So it's a very graphic theme, bold colors, and there's focus on like empowering greater equity, empowering better outcomes, empowering stronger policies, empowering equitable action. So that's one of the themes, and that's actually the theme that we prefer. It's just a strong message about CMAH. We're helping to empower people by the work that we do and we've done. The other theme was On the Move, and that one is showing how we're helping to move Minnesotans towards greater equality, policy, and action. So kind of a similar theme, except for it focuses on the move versus empowerment. So again, greater justice, better outcomes, stronger policies. So as we looked at what was presented to us, we all thought that the Empowerment 2020 was a much stronger theme for us. And in fact, the cover had a young man with a COVID mask, but it was just very, it was very powerful. And we felt that with everything that has gone on from COVID to George's murder, I mean, there's just been a lot. And we felt that we could take that theme and also bring some hope with it. So we focus on where we've been, but also bring hope. We're empowering people. So that's kind of where we are. As a part of the annual report, we'll still be covering, the mission of the council. There'll be a message from Madam Chair. I will have a message, and then there'll be a report on our 2020 activities. So what did we do in the legislative space? What's been happening in outreach? What is the landscape of the African heritage community? Because a lot of people wouldn't know that as well. What's going on in finance, and then just going forward, where are we heading? So that's kind of where we are with the annual report. As you can see, very, very aggressive schedule. So we are going to try to bring things forward to you as much as we can, but there's not a lot of time to turn on this. We got to roll on this. And hopefully we can get your trust that we will move forward appropriately. So I just want to know, was there any thoughts on the two themes? So empowerment 2020, and like power is real big. So everything else is in small caps, but power is in large caps. And then the other one is on the move. And so again, we're thinking we'd like to move forward with the empowerment strategy.
I like that, Linda. The other thing that I'll just kind of say for the council members to keep in mind, in the past, we have not necessarily been as engulfed when it comes to the design, so to speak. It's more of the content and kind of doing some wordsmithing here and there. So I kind of had a conversation with Linda, and I said, we're going to trust your judgment. What we would be looking for in December is kind of a rough, layout of what that will look like. But then the other thing I have to remember to do is, because the report is due on January 15th, we had said after the December meeting, we will probably have to have a special call meeting to look at it in its entirety, because we will meet on January 12th, that Tuesday, and that Friday, the report has to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions or comments? And somebody's doing a lot of background noise. Okay. So other comments, Dwayne, go ahead.
Yeah. I just have a quick point. Linda, I hear you talked about the landscape of people of African heritage. Is that going to include, and if not, I would suggest that we do continue with our last report. We did have the African heritage community talking about a demographic landscape. But, and I'm hoping that we continue to have that. I know the data there is since 2018. Maybe there's a way to look at it. There's any updated information from the state demographer or something like that that we can include, just to show the landscape of people of African heritage here in the state.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that's included.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Any other questions for Linda?
I'll just say I like the theme of empowerment. I think it speaks to self-determination, which is important for our community to really send the message that we are not waiting on anyone, but that we are creating and carving a path for our community on our own, for us, by us, empowerment. So I like that.
Thank you, Andre. Any others? All right. Thank you, Linda. You can stop sharing. And so I'll move to our next agenda item, which is the executive team met last week. Gosh, I want to say 2 weeks ago, but it was just like
That was just Thursday.
Oh my God. So we met last week, and one of the things that came up is due to just the projection, if you will, of what's going on with COVID. I'm sure you all saw what the governor had announced today, that we're going back to limiting gatherings and so forth. And so what we thought is the fact that we know that this pandemic, if you follow pandemics, they typically are around for like 2 to 3 years. So we as an executive committee wanted to bring it to you all to say we felt that it makes sense for us to continue meeting in this platform for the rest of the fiscal year, which would be from now until June 30th. Wanted to open up, for comments or questions. And so when we say the remainder of FY21, that's the current fiscal year that we're in right now. So we would continue our monthly meetings, but it would be via Zoom, or not via Zoom, but via WebEx. It would be a virtual platform. Comments or questions around that?
I'll jump in and say I think that is the right call, considering everything that we're hearing right now. I just have a question about the Day on the Hill and how that might impact. I don't know, can't remember exactly when we had this scheduled, but how that might impact the Day on the Hill.
And that Andre, actually will be coming up when we talk about when the staff give their reports, because we will be talking about that. We will have to think about what that would look like in this modality. So that means we would not be going to, the Capitol this year, but we'd have to really be strategic in how we would actually produce a Day on the Hill, and almost in this webinar-like format, where we would have our speakers, produce as panelists, and then people would either be we would record it so that they could go back and view it. But yes, that was another discussion that we did have. And I know that's going to come up even further for more in-depth discussion when the staff give their report. But excellent question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Others? Other thoughts?
I just wanted to support the fact that we can meet for the rest of the year using this platform. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jude.
Madam Chair.
Two people spoke at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, this is Jude. Yeah. How are you? Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a great call. And the only thing is, how do we engage our community more to participate and through online? It seems that even though we have Facebook out there, but the participation is lower than when we had in meeting in downtown before. But now that is online, since the anything we need to do to encourage our people to phone in or share with Facebook and get more information on what we are doing.
Actually, I would disagree with you. Since we've been meeting actually online, we've actually had more viewers than when we were meeting in St. Paul. And some months are going to be higher than others, which that's kind of the same thing that we ran into as well. But that is also, one of the things that we'll have to brainstorm, keeping in mind that, right now we're kind of down 2 staff members. So Mary, is filling in for Shakira, but right now Amber's kind of wearing a hat of legislative and outreach. So I think once we, make that determining factor of how we will move forward with not just engaging from this platform. I know one of the things that we were able to interest audience members in is when Amber had produced those, various town halls. And I think that engaged community as well. And there's still, I know with social distancing, if you're meeting one-on-one, that is still an option, for the staff to still be able to get out there and have our presence be known. But we've seen more, and this has been across the board, not just with our board meetings, but I know just in general, if you look at the amount of interaction and engagement, I've seen it increase because people don't have to travel. And now that we're going into our snowy season, and we hate to say that, but it's here. I think this is going to be, we're going to see our modality probably increase as well. But I know that is one of the things that is a part of the strategy that the staff has been working on. But you have to also, you know, there's some time that has to happen from the transition as well. So hopefully that answered your question, Jude.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carl, you had a question or comment?
Put it in the chat box.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed it. Hold on. Let me look here. Yes, you are correct. Thank you. The materials from last month also detail the engagement metrics that we've had over the last 6 months. So if you even go back to that, that'll also help. Thank you for that, Carl. Any other comments or questions in reference to us meeting in this modality for the rest of fiscal year 21, knowing that we still will have some strategies, you know, to pull together, some strategic metrics, I'll say that, you know, in reference to community engagement and just doing business in this new mode. All right, we're going to move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda and the team for the remainder of the meeting until we get to our standing items. So take it away, you all.
Great. Okay, so my executive director's report, as you all know, I started in the middle of October. So I'm just getting into my 1 month now. So I've spent a lot of time really becoming acclimated to the position. I've had tons of meetings already with various individuals, some on the state level and some in the governor's office. I have participated in a variety of training. So I'm doing, you know, budget training, purchase order training. So all of those things that you need to learn in order to run an office, which is key right now. And as our chair mentioned, we are understaffed right now. And so I'm trying to work on those pieces in order to be effective. And then just out there trying to learn what is going on in the community. What are the issues that we should be addressing? So having Commissioner Ho on was great for me because I learned a lot. And now I'll be able to follow up with her to get a little bit more in depth. So recently we brought on Mary Janish, who is on the call today to fill in for Shakira. So Mary, if you want to say hi and give everybody your email address, because we want you to send your per diem request to her as opposed to Amber or Shakira. So Mary, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Hi,
Okay.
I'm Mary Janish, and I presently work for the state in the DHS department. And the address you can send your per diems and any of your invoices is to Mary, MARY .L.JANISH at state.mn.us.
Okay, great. And it's in the chat box too. So Mary's excited to be here and we are excited to have her, trust me. So the other piece of the administrative functions of the office is also getting a policy director. So that has been posted, the legislative and policy director. So that's up and running. So far, we only have 5 applicants. So please send it out. I know that Amber has been posting it on Facebook in various places, and we've been sending it to our community partners and putting it in the bulletin. But I would encourage you to take the posting and just say, hey, we need to get some more candidates. I have not seen the candidates yet. HR does a first review and then they send me who they believe meet the basic criteria. And I will come back to you and let you know once that happens. So it's scheduled to close on the 12th. However, with 5 candidates, unless we got a whole slew of people over the last few days, we're going to extend that for another week. So I will keep you posted on that, but please just send that out. Okay, we talked about the annual report. Budget, I had to get that in, so I did do that. In addition, I put in a budget change item to see if I could get another head count. And the thought behind that is to get another policy legislative related person who could focus on specific areas, but then also focus on the African population. My goal is to make sure that the various groups can have some special attention, because we do have commonalities, but there are special needs in each group. So that has been submitted. However, we know what the budget situation is with the state, so I don't know. I'm just hoping. So that's kind of about it. There is an opportunity to work on a joint policy advisory committee for MN Dept. So if any of you have a transportation background or an interest, please let me know, because I need to have someone sit on this committee. If not, I'll just sit on it. But if you have an interest in it, circle back to me if you'd like. Let's see. So that's it. I think we can talk about the day on the Hill as a part of Amber's report at that time. So that's kind of what's been happening. We're setting up, for just various meetings, and that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Linda? What I will add is if there are specific connections or contacts that you feel Linda should be connected to, please do the electronic introduction, so that she is able to connect with the right constituents within the various communities. If hearing none, then I will move on to Amber for your report.
Good evening, everyone. I've been having really bad connection issues, so I'm going to keep the camera off. So as you all know, as a council, we do have vacancies in our office. And so my report is pretty inclusive of legislative and outreach updates. Now, obviously, since I am the outreach coordinator, I may not have all of the legislative updates that, Jasmine would have had, but I am trying to keep up as best as possible so that we are not falling behind in our connection to the state and the legislature. So obviously, I have a number of things to touch, so please bear with me. So the first thing I want to touch on is that we just went through election season. And so it's probably good to just do a check-in on what those election results are and what that means for the state going into 2021. So the election results, if you haven't been following closely at the state level, because obviously there's a lot going on in elections right now, mainly some of the top line items is that the Senate and the House still maintain the majorities they had prior to elections. So the Senate still maintains a Republican majority while the House maintains a DFL majority. So there is still a divided legislature. The caucuses met last week to vote for their leadership, and across the board, pretty much all of the caucuses maintain the leadership that they had prior to elections. And so Speaker of the House is still Representative Hortman. Representative Winkler is still the House Majority Leader. Senator Gazelka is still the Senate Majority Leader. Senator Kent still the Senate Minority Leader, and Representative Dowd is also still the House Minority Leader. So leadership is still maintained for continuity's sake in both the House and Senate caucuses and leadership roles. When it comes to elections results for the African Heritage community, all of the current legislators in the House won their races. And so that includes Representatives Moran, Hassan, Noor, Richardson, and Damuth. They all won their races in the House. So they'll be coming back. And then we also picked up 4 new legislators in the House, all who ran DFL. So that includes Cedric Frazier in District 45A. So that's like Plymouth, New Hope, Crystal area. Esther, and I'm going to butcher her name, so I'm so sorry. Agbaje in District 59B, which is in Minneapolis. Athena Hollins in 66B in St. Paul, and then John Thompson, 67A in St. Paul. And so the House nearly doubled their African Heritage representation for a total of 9 legislators in the House. In the Senate, Senator Bobby Joe Champion won his reelection. And then if you've been following earlier in the summer, Senator Jeff Hayden did not win his primary. And so he will not be returning back to the Senate, though we did speak during the Executive Council meeting that we did want to honor and thank him for his service, especially for his advocacy for the African Heritage community. So we'll be thinking about how we want to do that. But the person who did win his seat is also of African heritage, and his name is Omar Fateh. And so we do still have the same amount of African heritage legislators in the Senate for a total of 2. As of right now, I've been trying to compile a list of people throughout the state of Minnesota at any level who is of African heritage and won their race. And right now I have probably about almost 25 names. And so if you know someone at any level throughout the state, in any city or county or school board that won a race, please let me know, because we do want to honor those folks as well with a post on social media and on our website and all that good stuff. So if there's any questions about just election stuff briefly, please let me know. Okay, don't hear anything, so I'm going to move on. The next thing I want to touch on legislative-wise is the special session. And so if you all have been following, we've been having to hold a special session every 30 days because that is when Governor Wallace's peacetime emergency orders expire. They expire in a 30-day window. And so the legislature has to get called back for a special session. They decide whether or not to terminate his powers, that since we have a divided legislature, continues to fall on party lines, and it fails, so Governor Wallace continues to keep it. But the legislature has also been using that time to conduct business. And the major thing that happened last session, which was convened on October 12th, and it ended maybe about 4 days later, is that they were able to pass the bonding bill with bipartisan support. And this was a $1.9 billion package, which has been taking them over a year to pass. And so this was a major victory for the legislature. And in that package, there was $30 million set aside for tribal nations or BIPOC-led organizations for capital projects. Obviously, we will want to see a lot more than that throughout the state. But as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned on one of the COVID community resiliency and recovery calls, it's a good start because traditionally we just haven't been at the table during those bonding conversations. And so we want to take this momentum and build on it for future bonding bills. And so there's tons of information on where this money is going to be allotted to, all different types of projects throughout the state. But that was like the major win for the week for special session. In addition, there was, if you all remember from the summer during the, I think, July special session, the House passed a resolution, HR 1, declaring racism to be a public health crisis. This was carried by Representative Richardson. And so one of the outcomes of that resolution was to create a select committee in the House on racial justice. And so this committee was chaired and vice chaired by all Black women legislators. Representative Richardson and Representative Moran were chairs, and then the vice chair was Representative Lisa Dama. And so they held hearings from late September through mid-October-ish. And through those hearings, they held sessions for community experts and scholars throughout the state to give really good presentations about different issues and how racism exacerbates some of these particular issues. And they also spent a session just hearing from over 60 testifiers from the community as well. Just for example, they had a scholar from the University of Minnesota who she does her research on Black maternal health disparities, for example. And so it was actually a really cool committee. You can watch some of the hearings on their YouTube page, the House's YouTube page, because they were actually pretty dope. I learned some things. And so hopefully they're going to be using that information that they gather from the community to inform the legislature when they go into session, carrying particular bills and things of that nature. And so some other just brief things with the legislature, they are getting called back into session again on Thursday for another special session. And so we'll keep an eye on that and see what happens with that. I think one of the major conversations that some of us have had in other spaces is in alignment with Commissioner Ho, what's going to happen January 1 when COVID-19 funding and aid from the federal level goes away, and say there's not a second package in place. What's going to happen for the state? What do we need to be thinking about in the next couple of months? So hopefully that's something that's going to be in conversation at special session this week. So are there those are pretty much all my legislative updates. Are there any questions?
No, it's a lot. I mean, thank you for, kind of right now wear that double hat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but also I'm learning things I wanted to learn too. So I'm trying to take advantage.
So win-win.
Yeah. So I'll pivot to outreach, obviously, because of the season. Legislative maybe was a little bit heavier, but just a brief day on some of the outreach activities since the last meeting. So since it was election season, we really wanted to support things in community that were trying to get folks out to vote and just supporting that process if people had questions. So on October 1st, we did hold the voter education workshop with the Secretary of State. In addition, we also were able to make a connection with a local, between a local organization and a national voter engagement initiative called Be Woke Vote. We were able to help foster a connection with them locally. They were working with the Floyd family, actually, because the Floyd family wanted to do some voter outreach work in Minneapolis. And so they ended up partnering with multiple orgs, including the NAACP, to host an event in North Minneapolis, a voter registration event. So that was really nice. I also participated in one of ALF's town halls, their COVID-19 town halls, but this one was focused a lot more on getting out the vote in election season. So I did participate in that in mid-October as well. So that's the civic engagement side. In addition, I've been serving on a couple of committees. One has been the Community Recovery and Resiliency Work Group. So that was the work group that was instituted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Human Rights Commissioner, which is now being convened by our Chief Inclusion Officer, Chris Taylor. And that's really focusing on how the COVID response for the state is going to be equitable and should be equitable when it comes to communities of color, Indigenous communities, and other marginalized groups. So the last meeting we had was really focusing on our response when it comes to the economy and housing in particular, and employment. And yeah, I mean, the biggest conversation we had was what's going to happen in January. And so hopefully when we come back into conversations throughout the coming months, we can see what that looks like, especially when the budget forecast comes out. I also serve on MNSCU's Law Enforcement Education Task Force, which has largely been informational right now. But next month's meeting, or this month's meeting, because it's November, they will probably start to focus more on crafting recommendations. And if you didn't know, just fun facts, MNSCU educates like 86% of the peace officers in the state of Minnesota. So they're like the primary training ground for peace officers in Minnesota. And so they convene this task force, and Naria asked me to be on it, to look at the ways of, you're welcome. To look at the ways in which that training process, the education programs can better prepare peace officers in a way that their processes and their practices in the field would be more equitable. So those are committees I serve on. And then the last thing I want to share before I guess we talk about Day on the Hill is the Policy Summit. So the Policy Summit registration is open. I did send a calendar hold to all of you all so you know when it is occurring, but it is a week from today, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Registration has been open, so please share with your networks. This week we are hoping, well, we will announce our speakers for the event as well before we head into Tuesday. So we just want to promote, and ask people please to register so that we can make sure they get the event details out and know how to log in, know how to participate. Thanks. And know how to participate in the event. Sorry, I sent the details only to Linda on accident. There we go. Everybody should see it now. So yeah, we really want to be able to, in this time, encourage people to transition their energy from elections into policy advocacy. And this is where we're going to start having conversations about what are the major policy battles that we're going to have going into the legislature next year, and how we need to be showing up in those conversations. So that's what I have. As far as Day on the Hill, I think those conversations are very preliminary right now. We just was talking about format, basically. I know I had a conversation with someone in human rights, and I think there may be folks here that are doing the MLK celebration. Just talking about the format. I know they're going to go with, I think, a pre-recorded event. And so we were just talking about where different ways to do Day on the Hill, which is arguably our biggest event of the year. It normally attracts 300 people. So there's no way we're going to have that in person, given the spread of COVID, but we still want it to be impactful.
So let me just jump in. One of the other conversations that we had in reference to Day on the Hill was for us to pull together a small team. So again, no more than 3, I was going to say community members, 3 council members to help plan this day, because it is a lot, for just to put it all on staff. The other thing that we have to think about is typically we have our Day on the Hill in February. Shakira will just be coming back in January. So we felt that as we're thinking about this different platform that we're going to have to submit this, or not to submit it, but that we're going to have to present rather, the Day on the Hill, that we need to be thinking about that. And so it would be helpful to have at least 3 of the council members to participate in, just kind of a small planning team, so to speak. And so that kind of gets to, I know, Andre, you had asked the question, and I know Carl also kind of chimed in too, and others have said, what does this mean for Day on the Hill? Okay, sorry. This is what happens when you're at home and you have other people that come home and don't realize you're in a meeting. Sorry, you guys. But if we could have 3 people that would be able to participate on that, that would be awesome. If you want to volunteer now, let us know. Otherwise, I would say get your names to Linda and have her, you know, kind of collect the names of who wants to be a part of the planning team. Questions or comments?
I was just going to type in, but I was going to say that I don't have a lot of capacity, but I'd love to participate in that planning.
Okay. We're taking that little capacity that you have, Andre.
I'm kicking myself even to say it. But we'll work it out.
You don't have to travel though.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. I'm not volunteering, but is it possible that we extend that to the community itself to get someone who is not on the council to participate on the committee?
Well, and I think that.
What do you all think about that?
Yeah, that would be you all's decision. You know what I mean? So I think we need to start with at least three council members, and then you all decide how you're going to engage for other people to help. We've done that. I mean, every year we've done that. So it hasn't just been, you know, just the staff, but they've also, you know, basically partnered with outside agencies. I know at one point, I know Justin previously has tried to, you know, connect with the Divine Nine and try to coordinate something with them. There's others that they've tried to coordinate with. So I mean, I think the other piece is don't feel like even if you volunteer, three of you all, that will be the conversation to say who else should be involved to make this, you know, kind of a larger capacity perspective, if that helps.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. That's exactly what I was alluding to.
Perfect.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Thanks, any questions or comments for Amber? So I know that was a lot that she gave, but this is why it's recorded. All right, hearing none, I'm going to move on to our standing items. So the oral history project, as you all know, we had actually applied for a grant, received the grant. One of the things that we had agreed to when the executive team had met, we said, since this has been, Shakira has been primarily the point of contact, we would wait, since this is not anything that we're trying to rush and get done. And we want this to be done, you know, well and thought out and not necessarily, you know, just kind of half done. So we said it would be okay if we waited until Shakira came back, and then we were able to move forward in putting out an RFP to have folks help us with this project. So just wanted to kind of share that information for that particular piece. Any questions about the oral history project or even the delaying of moving forward with actions? All right, so the next piece is the strategic plan. I believe, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we are trying to set up a meeting with us as a follow-up. So as you all know, at the last meeting, we agreed that we would extend DeYoung and Associates contract to the end of the fiscal year. The beauty about that is that doesn't mean that that's additional dollars. It just means that for her to help us with full implementation, it gives it a longer stint versus should have been rushing to try to get things done because the contract would have ended in December. And so that's good news. And I think where we're at now is just setting up a follow-up meeting and just kind of discussing the new timeline. So I wanted to put that out there for you all as well. Any questions about the strategic plan and just where we're at?
No, I think the sooner we can get that going, the better, so we don't lose the momentum. But the thing we need to be doing. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Absolutely, I concur. All right, and then the next piece that we had is the commissioner meeting schedule. So we had at first decided that December we would not have a commissioner come. For December, we would basically use December for us to look at the annual report, may come up that we may need to look at before the session started. But as you all, if you have not seen or have not heard, Robert Doty, who was the assistant commissioner, is now the actual commissioner of revenue. And he and I had a conversation a while back, right around the time that we were transitioning into Linda joining. And he had a great idea. He said he felt that we should have revenue and MMB come and talk about the differences with the budget and how it potentially could impact us. And so we will in December have the commissioner of revenue and possibly the commissioner of MMB be able to come, and we'll have to decide, because I know the commissioner of MMB, is there an interim that has been named? Do you all know yet for MMB?
Yeah, there is a new commissioner. The name, I'm gonna put the name in the comments, but yes, there is a new commissioner.
Okay. Okay, so that would be my recommendation for that. And then the final piece in the standing items is we have been talking about, as you all know, so since really February, well, January was our annual meeting, but February, we've had a commissioner, or commissioners come every CMA meeting and be able to give us insight on their agency, some resources that they may have, and then just how we can, better work together and partner from CMA as well as with their agency. And so there were a couple of times where we had some commissioners come and we ran out of time. And so we actually had submitted some questions in the chat box for them to respond back. We were going to try and collect them, and we're still going to do that and have a separate newsletter. But again, we want to table that until our admin person comes back. Because one, we said that's a lot for our temporary admin to go in and try to decipher what questions needed to be answered, who the contacts were, and then what follow-up needed to happen. And so seeing that we know Shakira kind of has all of that, in a file, and she knows exactly where to get it, we said we would wait and then be able to produce that document at the beginning of 2021. Questions, comments, concerns, because I know I just kind of gave you all a mouthful in a matter of 10 minutes. Well, being that we had quite a bit to discuss, we are towards the end of our meeting agenda. There is one item that I want to make an announcement, and I just got to pull it up. So Councilmember Lee, Deborah Lee, was not able to come, but she did want me to share out that St. Cloud Technical and Community College and St. Cloud State are actually doing, it's called Voice Healing and Power, the Impact of Racism on Mental Health in St. Cloud. This will take place Monday, November 16th. It is an all-day event from 9 to 3:30, and the summit is free. And I believe this is via Zoom. I can have Lynn, she did have a flyer. So Linda, if you can send it out to the council members, then if they are able to join, then they can join this event as well. So I did want to make that announcement because she did ask us to make that announcement. Any other announcements that we have, or that anybody else has, I should say? All right, so lastly, I would just say, make sure that we're sharing out, the announcement, the posting for the legislative, and you said it closes on the 12th, which is Thursday.
Sorry, I have this quick announcement.
But it will be extended. It will be extended if we don't have enough candidates.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Jude, yes.
Okay, I will send it. Who do I send to? There's an announcement from African Economic Development Solution. It's a nonprofit here. So they're organizing 2020 National African Immigrant Leadership Conference, December 10 to 11, 2-day event. So who do I send to share among us?
Amber said you can send it to her.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, if nothing else, if I can have a motion to adjourn, I'm giving you all the gift of time back. It's 7:33. We can have a motion to adjourn.
I move the motion to adjourn. Jude Nadi.
All right, and Carl Crawford second. All in favor?
Yes.
We are officially adjourned. Thank you all so much. Be safe because it's snowing.
Thank you. Stay well.
Let's be safe. Take